Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live inside the Beltway. I am so glad you can join me this morning. I hope you are up and around and having a great, good morning to you. Overnight, Democrats and Republicans agreed to punt the debt ceiling to December. Neither Chuck Schumer nor Mitch McConnell have given up an inch, but they both agreed. Let's let the dust settle on however much the Democrats among themselves agree to put the country in the hole more. And then we'll come back and talk about the debt limit in December. So a successful punt by both teams leaves the markets relieved. Let me do the market update early as a result of this. This is brought to you, of course, by Birch Gold. If you're going to buy gold because you can't trust these bozos in Congress, especially on the Democratic side, to listen to the smart guys like McConnell, then you need to own a lot more gold than you currently own. And you get it from Birch Gold. Go to hughgold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747. Gold is at $17.59 an ounce today. Overseas, they're all clapping and jumping up and down that the United States isn't going to default. That's a trader trick. The United States is never going to default. But England is up almost 1%. Germany is up 1.25%. France is up 1.25%. Yesterday, the markets kind of figured it out that the United States was not going to default, and the Dow went up 102 points, the S&P went up 17, the Nasdaq went up 68, Amazon went up $40 a share yesterday. It's going to do the same again today, it appears. It looks like, a punt sometimes satisfies both teams. In the Vikings-Browns game, and I bring this up especially for the benefit of my AIM 1280, the Answer fans in the Twin Cities, the Browns loved punting in the second half because they were ahead 11-7 and then 14-7. They didn't mind punting, provided that the Vikings didn't score, and I don't know that the Vikings will score again this year, but I digress. So there is this agreement. Meanwhile, an Obama judge in Texas enjoined the Texas abortion law. His name is Judge Pittman. And, of course, they shopped around. He's in Austin, and they found an Obama judge to take it before, and he enjoined it, another nationwide injunction. Look, the Supreme Court's got to decide this, and the Supreme Court is going to decide this, and I believe the Supreme Court will, by a 6-3 ruling, overturn Roe v. Wade, overturn KCB Planned Parenthood, and write a new set of rules which basically says state legislatures can write any law they want, provided that abortions are available in those cases where the health of a mother is indeed at risk. They may also require the abortion and incest exceptions in their ruling as being beyond arbitrary and capricious and therefore violating a reasonability clause. That seems to be the modern take, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's where the Chief Justice leads at least six of his colleagues, including himself, to a decision early next year. It shouldn't take them that long. They've been thinking about the abortion cases for 50 years since it went wrong in 1973 with Roe v. Wade. Alliance Defending Freedom will be there. I am very proud of this audience, but we can do more. We raised $20,000 in the first week in hundreds and 500s for our ADF, and I'm very, very proud of that. But the Alliance Defending Freedom needs a lot more, and they need some big checks and a lot more small checks. People who can't otherwise afford, people who go to church every week and know that religious liberty allows them to do so, and they put their $5 or $10 in the basket if they're Catholic, or they go online if they're a high-tech, Protestant. No matter who you are, if you're a Sabbath-keeping Jew, you're a Seventh-day Adventist, whether you are a Mormon or a Baptist, whether you are a Buddhist or a Hindu or an atheist who believes in religious liberty because you're Jefferson-like, you still ought to be supporting Alliance Defending Freedom. And you ought to be doing it today over at hughhewitt.com. Just let it load at the very top, and you will see what you need to do. Now let me do the rundown. And I appreciate it, by the way. We need Alliance Defending Freedom there every single day. Yesterday I wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post. Is it time for Anthony Fauci to step aside? Wow! Boy, did the left go nuts. Now, as I say to my editor over there, the fact that there are 1,600 comments does not faze me. Comments are like callers. You only worry about them when they're not there. But a couple of high-profile left progs, I've never heard of these people, but they've got 500,000 followers. They took out after me, and they want me to resign, even though I'm not giving advice to the country and telling noble lies or getting things wrong on CBS about Christmas. Anthony Fauci and I had a perfectly fine conversation, one of many last week, but I think, like Dr. Collins, his useful life as a leader of public health is over. And I explained why in the Washington Post, and the left went nuts. And do you know why? It's got nothing to do with Dr. Fauci. It's got to do with their perception that Fauci is anti-Trump. And therefore, to be pro-Fauci is to be pro-anti-Trump. And to be anti-Fauci is to be anti-anti-Trump. It's all very bizarre in the world where everything is about Trump. Trump exerts this extraordinary gravitational pull on a lot of people on the left and some people on the right, where everything comes down to Trump, not Trump. In fact, there's a story in today's Washington Post about the Ohio Senate race. And I'll be moderating a debate. I know all the Ohio senators, would-be senators. I know them all. I like them all. And I'm trusted by them all to do a fair debate. So I'll be going to Ohio at the end of the month to moderate a debate among the 6 would-be Republicans. But here's the story in the Wall Street Journal this morning. How tight is Trump's grip on the GOP? Take a look at the Ohio Senate primary. 5 candidates offer slight variations on Trumpism in a contest that will test the ex-president's popularity. Well, there are 6 candidates to begin with, and one of them, Matt Dolan, isn't Trumpist at all. He's sort of like Rob Portman. And 5 of them are varying degrees of alignment with former President Trump. And some of them are if they're Trumpist, it's pretty hard to tell. But some of them are very Trumpy, like Josh Mandel, and others are less so. And by Trumpy, I mean populist in their appeal. And there aren't any supporters of January 6th running around, but the president himself didn't support the resistance, the insurrection that flooded the Congress and is now being rightfully prosecuted. But it's a convenient lens that the mainstream media likes to use, so they use it. The WHO endorsed the first ever malaria vaccine. That's great news for the people in Africa, especially the children who suffer and die from malaria by the hundreds of thousands every year. The White House announced a $1 billion purchase of rapid at-home coronavirus tests. Not sure that's going to do anything to change the course of the virus. I really don't. I don't think that's going to do anything to change the course of the virus. Chinese jets menace Taiwan, pressuring U.S. support of the island's defenses. The Quad needs to step up and start adding assistance to Taiwan. Now, Taiwan is not part of the Quad. The Quad is the U.S., Australia, India, and Japan, the 4 island Pacific nations that have a great deal of interest in cabining the People's Republic of China and stopping their attempt to intimidate the island state of Taiwan. They flew a record number of jets into the defenses yesterday. Very fascinating story at the Wall Street Journal on a secret CIA escape gate at Kabul airport. If we had stayed longer, more people would have gotten out. Joe Biden left them there. Joe Biden lied to you, by the way, about how many Americans were left behind, citizens. Amazon wins record U.S. tax breaks to expand delivery network in the Financial Times. I hope so. If they bring jobs to a community ought to rebate to them the local and state taxes. I'm a shareholder. If they're not out there maximizing shareholder return, they're not doing their job. They're doing their job. Also from the Wall Street Journal, coal shortages. Coal. You know, the stuff we're not supposed to like. Coal shortages are pushing up prices and weighing on economies all across the world. The trial is coming to a conclusion on the Varsity Blues matter, where people paid to play. They paid a guidance counselor in L.A. to pretend that their kids were varsity athletes to get them into Stanford, USC, and other places. And the question is, did the bribers know they were bribing? I don't think the jury's going to have a hard time figuring out that when your kid's getting admitted to Stanford as a water polo player, and he or she is not either in the water polo world or playing summer water polo or a stud, something weird's going on. New Zealand is raising its interest rates in a precursor to everyone else in the West raising their interest rates, which is why, by the way, you got to go to Birch Gold because gold and interest rates are going to go up. HughGold.com. New Zealand raising its rate. Big story in the Financial Times on the souring of the UK-France relationship. It's across the board. It's deep. It's enduring. But the French will return to the Brits when they need them. Diplomacy is the best path to thwart Iran nukes. Jake Sullivan, the, I think, very good National Security Advisor to President Biden, has told the Israelis. We'll talk to Michael Oren about that today. We'll also talk to him about Iran's armed drone prowess, subject of a Wall Street Journal story today. And China's ability to launch an attack on Taiwan which is growing by leaps and bounds. Don't go anywhere, America. You're listening to The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Now, the most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as
he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Pandering, overweight snowflake. What has race got to do with the last election and angry voters? Nothing. But you want to virtue signal to your political masters. If it's possible, let's ignore for a second that you have admitted you called the Chinese equivalent of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that you haven't denied that you gave him a heads up totally illegally because you have no role in the chain of command, and say, don't worry. If that crazy guy, the president, if President Trump is going to declare war with China, I'll give you a heads up. I'm on your side, you commies. I'm a commie too. Is that why in 2015 in combat at a NATO summit, you can see the video right there. He says, China, not our enemy. Really? Because China thinks America is her enemy? Why would you say that? And why do you think it's your duty to be communist China's man inside the Pentagon? Let's put that all to one side. Your love of bigoted propaganda like critical race theory created by Derek Hall, Biden's mentor at Harvard, which states, the textbooks state, if you are white, you are racist. You may not know it, but you're racist, which itself is a statement of bigotry.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Women are born ignorant of male sexual nature. It's not their fault. We're so different from women. There's no fault here, but it is the fault of a society that doesn't teach them that. And society always did, but not since the 60s, because they wanted to believe men and women are basically the same. So I'm curious, are you a religious home?
Yes, we are religious.
Right. So here's my theory. Religious Americans are less naive than secular Americans.
I like that theory.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens are captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy. For those considering a career in politics. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You are witnessing a shameful part of history.
All Democrats who want to break the filibuster, cut number 8. Cut number
on the default that we're the crisis that
we haven't failed to do that since our inception as a country. We need to act.
It is cut number 9, Joe Manchin.
On the default that we're the crisis that we have a time zone and timetable for, we are not going to default as a country. We will not default. That's the responsibility we have as senators, as congressmen, as 535 of us responsible to protect this great country in an equal branch of government. I truly implore both leaders, my caucus leader and the majority leader is Chuck Schumer, and basically the minority leader is Mitch McConnell. I implore them to engage, start working, work this out. There should not be a crisis. I've been very, very clear where I stand on the filibuster. I don't have to repeat that. I think I've been very clear. Nothing changes. But the bottom line is we have a responsibility to be the adults. Our leadership has the responsibility to lead. And that's what I'm asking and imploring them to do. We should not have these artificial crises. We are not going to default on our debt. We are still basically the currency of the world, and we will remain that. So anybody who thinks any different than that is basically speculating for the sake of theatrics. Let's get on with the business of this country and making sure that people have the opportunities. Get through this COVID crisis that we have right now with the variant. Please accept the science and get vaccinated. Please help us move forward. This is what we're asking everybody to do. So the only thing I can say at this time to Leader Schumer and to Minority Leader McConnell is please lead, work together. This is a democracy. Democracy only works when all sides work for the same common goal, and that is to keep the United States of America united. Thank you all.
So both sides need to keep Joe Manchin happy, and so both sides got together and said, we'll punt. Schumer wouldn't agree to use reconciliation. McConnell wouldn't agree to not use reconciliation, so they agreed to punt until December. The moron from Rhode Island, and I really use that word only because the Bible enjoins us from using fool, Sheldon Whitehouse, who belongs to a racist club and somehow gets away with it, and who's just a goofball, said Mitch McConnell back down. That's just silly. Chuck Schumer, and he agreed to a 30-day truce, and I think Schumer realizes that's his face-saving way out. We'll see come December. But Joe Manchin basically gets his way on most everything because he's needed by both. Great position to be in. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Key City Capital.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You are witnessing a shameful part of history that is unfolding in the United States of America. We've got a president who was caught in a bald-faced lie about withdrawing from Afghanistan. We've got a general announcing to the world that we have utterly and completely failed. We have a general on record announcing to the world that we are guilty of a major failure.
It was a logistical success, but a strategic failure.
General Milley admitting that he was leaking and giving intel to book authors about Donald Trump.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Now, I know I have listeners all around the world, some live via the internet, some get the podcast. There are two different podcasts, Highly Concentrated Hugh, which is the Hugh Hewitt Show on steroids. It's the first couple of segments in an interview or two for those who are doing intense workouts. And then there's the interview with Hugh Hewitt, which is a longer one-on-one interview. But I've got listeners in England and listeners in the Commonwealth spread across the United States, the world. And I also believe in following our closest ally, the United Kingdom, and Israelis' politics very, very closely. Michael Oren will be along after the break. I came across in my research yesterday 2 clips from UK media. One was sent to me by Russ. Thank you, Russ. I'll come back to that. I want to begin, however, with Boris Johnson. Now, in Great Britain, the two great parties, the Tory and Labour, have annual conferences. The Liberal Democrats is the third party, and they're not a great party. They were a John Anderson-like burst that just won't go away. So the two great parties have annual conferences where the Labour Party goes crazy and further to the left, and the Conservatives decide how will they maintain their great majority from the last election. Boris Johnson spoke at the annual Conservative Tory conference. And here are the greatest hits from that speech, cut 21. Not working. What is up with our audio machine this morning? It just is resetting and resetting. Whisper in my ear when it works. Boris Johnson is in trouble with the Tories on the far right and the more conservative branch because he has raised taxes like George H.W. Bush did after his election in 1988. If you remember at his acceptance speech, he said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And then he went on and raised taxes in the great budget deal, which was a disaster probably. Never, ever do a deal with the Democrats. They promised cuts in spending in exchange for a great deal of fiscal discipline. The fiscal discipline didn't come, hikes in taxes in exchange for fiscal discipline when Team Bush sat down with I believe, George Mitchell at the time, the Democrat who had led the Senate. And so when George Bush came for re-election, people threw it in his face that he said, "Read my lips, no new taxes," and it agreed to a tax hike. Boris Johnson now faces the same, but not the same thing. There isn't that kind of line, "Read my lips, there's no new taxes." There is a Conservative Party manifesto that said certain taxes wouldn't rise, that he has now, in fact, put forward as necessary to raise if the leveling up agenda, that's what their agenda in the Tory party is called, leveling up. It's where they go out and they get the people, instead of saying, like the left wing in the United States Congress, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, let's go for broke and ruin everybody's lives and get everyone in equal misery. The Tories in Great Britain are saying, let's get everybody in the starting blocks, especially through home ownership. Let's try it again. Boris Johnson at the Tory conference, cut 21. Still not going to work for us. Do I have to go back? Okay, we're going to have to go back to Joe Manchin. Is it completely broken, Adam, or is it just all audio is off? All right, so I'll go back then to, I hate when that happens. It's early in the morning for me to be talking this much, but that's okay. The secret CIA gate. This is the story that will upset you the most, I think, today, by Jessica Donati in the Wall Street Journal. While thousands of people crowded outside the main gates of Kabul airport, seeking to escape Afghanistan in August, the Central Intelligence Agency opened a back door about 2 miles away along the northern perimeter of the airfield. Known by various code names, including Glory Gate and Liberty Gate, the airport entry, which hasn't previously been reported, was so secret even the Taliban were unaware it existed. Think about that line. Even the Taliban were unaware it existed? I should hope so. It was located opposite a gas station run by CIA operatives and Delta Force, guarded by a CIA-trained Afghan paramilitary unit known as O2, who evacuated alongside Americans in the final flights. That, by the way, gives me hope. I think that the O2 people are not very pleased with what has happened. If the O2 people are going to organize the kind of resistance that will find an entry point near the border of Tajikistan at some point, or near the border of Iran at some point, or near the border of China at some point, and begin the civil war which is inevitable in Afghanistan. The gas station was where our guys would go to grab Afghans who were seeking to leave, a former CIA operative said. Initially, it was used to smuggle out priority cases for the CIA, including intelligence assets, local agents and their families, and a list of high important cases sent by the White House. So the White House knew that they could get people out. They knew they had a gate that they could continue to use. If they simply held the gates, closed it off, said the perimeter is going to be closed for 2 weeks, they could have kept people coming in through Liberty Gate. And they closed that gate and they left. That's the key reveal in here. All right, now to Boris Johnson at the Tory Conservative Conference, giving the highlights of what's ahead for the Conservative movement in Britain. Cut 21.
It's the first time since the general election of 2019 when we finally sent that corduroy communist cosmonaut into orbit where he belongs. And on July the 19th, we decided to open every single theatre and every concert hall and nightclub in England. And we knew that some people would still be anxious. So we sent top government representatives to our sweatiest boîte de nuit to show that anyone could dance perfectly safely. And wasn't he brilliant, my friend? Let's hear it. Let's hear it for John Bon Jovi. Living proof. Living proof. When I was lying in St. Thomas's Hospital last year, I looked blearily out of my window at a hole in the ground between the ICU and another much older Victorian section. And amid the rubble of brick, they seemed to be digging a hole for someone or something, or indeed someone, possibly me. And you know those people gluing themselves to roads. I don't call them legitimate protesters like some Labour councillors do. I think some Labour councillors actually glue themselves to roads. I say they're a confounded nuisance who are blocking ambulances, and I'm glad Pretty is taking new powers to insulate them snugly in prison where they belong. Did you see them last week? Did you watch them last week in Brighton? Hopelessly divided, I thought they looked. Their leader, like a seriously rattled bus conductor, pushed this way and that by a, not that they have bus conductors anymore, unfortunately, but like a seriously rattled bus conductor pushed this way and that by a Corbynista mob of sellotape spectacled sans-culottes. If you want a supreme example of global Britain in action, of something daring and brilliant that would simply not have happened if we'd remained in the EU, I give you AUKUS. AUKUS. An idea so transparently right that Labour conference voted overwhelmingly against it. And I know there has been a certain raucous caucus from the anti-AUKUS caucus. The spirit of our Olympians. It's an incredible thing to come yet again in the top four. A formidable effort for a country that has only 0.8% of the world's population, in spite, Jacob, of all our best efforts. But
This is Boris Johnson using Trump techniques, but a formidable vocabulary that the former president does not have at his command. Of course, Boris Johnson, fluent in ancient Greek, can recite Homer at length. Oxbridge graduate, extraordinarily brilliant writer and columnist and raconteur, unleashed in adopting President Trump's style at the podium of believing that a laugh is good for a speech. And it was a great speech. We need more of that in the United States. Here's what we don't need. Remember Nigel. Nigel is, of course, the voice of the far right. Not the far right. The very, very right. The far right is crazy, and Nigel Farage is not that. He's a good guy. He's just far more conservative than most. And he actually is responsible for getting the United Kingdom out of the European Union. So, Nigel, our hat is off to you. He's talking with Ingrid Seward, who's the editor of Majesty magazine, which some of you actually get because you're royalist in heart. And they're talking about Prince Harry. And I saw this, it was sent to me by Russ, and I laughed at the whole... You got to imagine that Nigel is having a pint, by the way. It's Talking Pints with Nigel Farage. It's a new show on a new network. And here's their chat about Harry which I found amusing. Cut 22.
Now we have Prince Harry and Meghan, who appear to be not just mad with money lust, but actually intent on destroying the institution.
I just don't understand where Harry's head is, because we all loved him, and he was like everybody's slightly wayward son. And you wanted to...
He was Jack the Lad, wasn't he?
He was, and you wanted to hug him, and he said, I don't
Stop.
like the press. And he said,
He was Jack the Lad. Now, that's my nickname in high school. There goes Jack the Lad. That's what they used to call me, Jack the Lad. And that's when I wasn't doing the Wave Master stuff, because you can't surf every day. But Jack the Lad. So I kind of resent that. But let's pick up on, after using my moniker, Nigel goes on.
Press. And he said, darling, I understand, but you've got to do it. And he was, I suppose he was very childlike, really. He's not very bright, and I think he would probably admit that. He's not. I mean, there's just no two ways about it.
And she's clearly quite domineering.
And she is clearly quite domineering. But I think, reading into the whole situation, Harry wanted out of the royal family a long time ago. He just didn't know how to do it. Because when he was in the army, he said, I do remember ages ago, he said, I just wish I wasn't a prince. And I remember Jilly Cooper coming up and saying, what a tragic thing for this boy to say. Here he is in this life of incredible privilege that none of us will ever know anything like, and you're not prepared to take on the responsibility.
Well, they just walked away, didn't they? And they planned to walk away.
And I think that is sad for Charles.
I tell you what disgusted me, Ingrid. A friend of mine, ex-Royal Marine, said there was a big Royal Marine dinner, fundraising dinner for veterans that Harry was supposed to be at. He cancelled a week before. That can happen in busy diaries. But the same night that Royal Marine dinner took place was the night that he was in Leicester Square, overheard talking to the boss of Disney, asking whether his wife could get some voiceover work. And so,
Oh, that's not good.
So, there he was, Lieutenant General of the Royal Marines, a very privileged position. They've all turned against him. And frankly, we've got the Diamond Jubilee coming up next. The Platinum Jubilee coming up next year. Big moment. Will Harry and Meghan come back for it?
I think they will. Because I think they need to. I think.
Well, you see, there you have it. That's what Great Britain is obsessing on: is will Harry and Meghan come back for the Platinum Jubilee? I found it funny. Jack the Lad. I should hear my name called after all these years. There is ReliefFactor.com in my hand. I'm taking it right now. I am going to be out and about on the highways and byways of the Beltway today, walking, trundling, or running. Running infrequently, trundling often, walking always, because if you're not moving, you're dying, right? So keep moving. I don't want to die until my time comes, and that means I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega every day. It's the only supplement I take. I take a vitamin every day. I take whatever my doctor prescribes, and I take this, ReliefFactor.com, because it works, because they're anti-inflammatories. Nature's anti-inflammatories, carefully crafted, carefully sculpted, very easy to use, beautifully designed. I spoke to the founder, had lunch with the founder a week ago about how it's a product I love to tell people about, because people tell me about it when I see them. You will see me, by the way, in Atlanta a week from yesterday, October 13th, with Herschel Walker, Brian Westbury, and Alfredo Ortiz. But you've got to go and get a ticket, am920theanswer.com. I'll bring my Relief Factor with me. If you come out and meet me beforehand at the VIP reception, we can compare ReliefFactor.com stories. From Israel next, Dr. Oren joins us. Stay tuned.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Instantaneous, momentary pleasure is a value the left understands that keeps their entire coalition together. And Fauci understood this. Fauci understood the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. He understood the narrative that you do not cross that line. Now, we see this happen all the time, but we don't always talk about it. We don't always, those of us that are conservatives and actually love the country, we don't actually analyze the place that certain activist groups and ideas have over the other. Who gets the final say when there's a clash, when there's a conflict, when there's a collision? Another example would be, so the other side cares deeply about the Me Too movement unless it threatens Joe Biden becoming president. So Me Too matters a lot unless it gets in the way of controlling the White House. Power, the control of the federal government, then matters more than some sort of virtuous, righteous campaign to listen and to believe all women. Currently, there is an epic clash that the media is totally ignoring. Now, they are covering it here and there, but there is a clash between two of the favorite teams that have been created, fostered, supported, and aided over the last 18 months. You have on one side Team BLM. BLM Incorporated, racial justice, skin color matters. Now, as all of you know, after last summer of Floydapalooza, that group gets whatever they want.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
But the first lie that we were told, the first lie that we know now, no one told Biden to keep troops in Afghanistan. That's what Biden said. Did you guys, by the way, hear the chants when Biden went to the congressional baseball game? I don't want to go all over the place here, but that's our commander-in-chief. He didn't get a great reception. But no one told Biden to keep the troops in Afghanistan. That's huge, right? That's absolutely huge. Biden completely lied about it. The guy's a habitual liar. The first lie the senators exposed was Biden telling ABC News' George Stephanopoulos back in August that no one advised him to keep 2,500 American troops in Afghanistan.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined from Israel by Dr. Michael Oren. Follow Dr. Oren at Dr. Michael Oren on Twitter. He's, of course, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy minister. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I am good, Hugh. Good to be back with you, as always.
Thank you. Yesterday, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor to the president, who is your friend, I don't know him, but Robert O'Brien speaks very highly of him, met with National Security Council Chairman Eyal Hulata, who I do not know and have not heard of before, as the U.S.-Israel Strategic Consulting Group, an interagency bilateral forum, met to discuss Iran. What do you think they talked about, and do you think actually that this group of American presidents and advisors would ever strike against Iran in a meaningful way alongside of Israel?
Well, let me couch it as hope, okay? I don't know what they talked about. I hope they talked about that Jake Sullivan, yes, I have a very high opinion of Jake Sullivan, told his Israeli counterpart that the United States intends to go back into talks with Iran. And maybe they're optimistic about getting the JCPOA renewed, and in which case the United States is going to do X, Y, and Z to enhance Israel's security, which means understandings, that the United States understands that if Iran violates the agreement, if Iran starts moving ahead to enrich uranium or create a warhead or to put that warhead on top of a ballistic missile, the United States would consider that a violation and will act accordingly, either by itself or by supporting Israeli activity. But also capabilities. The United States has military capabilities that Israel does not have. I don't want to surprise anybody. Israel does not have strategic bombers. And the United States could lend, lease, sell some of these capabilities to Israel and send, I think, a very profound message to Iran, don't mess with us.
Now, Michael, there's also a story in the Wall Street Journal. Iran's armed drone prowess reshapes security in the Middle East. Tehran uses off-the-shelf components to build armed drones used in attacks that challenge the U.S. and its allies in the Middle East. They cite the attacks from Gaza on Israel during the recent war. They cite the attacks on the Saudi Arabian oil field. And they cite the growing evidence that the drones are bigger, faster, stronger, and more deadly. Against this kind of attack, you need an Iron Dome, but you also need some very aggressive forward defense. I don't know that this team is capable in the United States of anticipating that kind of forward defense.
Well, the drones are not right now a threat to the United States. It may be a threat to some United States forces in the Middle East, but not certainly the mainland United States. It's a threat to Israel mainland because we have, as you mentioned, Iranian proxies on our borders, both to the north and the south, and to the east and pretty much the west, pretty much surrounded by Iranian proxies, and they will have these drones. They've used the drones already. So, yes, we have Iron Dome to shoot them down. We're also a world leader in the development of concentrated energy, i.e. lasers, which have been proven effectively recently in a test in taking down drone aircraft. So we're going to have to address this.
I didn't know that. Stop and tell me about that. I didn't know that Israel led in concentrated energy. Do you see beams going up in the sky at night? You have no idea what they're doing?
No, but it's already actually been in the paper here, so I'm not revealing any secrets. But this is a system operated actually from aircraft in the air that can spot a drone and take them out.
How great! Are you going to share that with us?
Yeah, I'm sure maybe we'll be working on it with you.
I hope you're called phasers. Are they called phasers because you're the right era to have grown up with Star Trek in the United States. We need phasers, right?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for the flying automobiles, but I'm still waiting for the Jetsons. But no, but I think that eventually projectiles, as we know them, will be phased out. They'll be looked upon once upon in the future as like bows and arrows, and lasers will replace. I know of projects that have taken place in Israel that were developed in parallel with the Iron Dome system that were based on lasers.
So it's conceivable there will be a day when the rocket takes off and it gets about 6 inches off the platform or whatever launcher it's got, wherever it is in southern Lebanon, and it's destroyed.
Yes, and then the enemy will figure out some way around that too. So that's the
that is true,
technology.
But that kind of technology, when it arrives, you don't get much faster than the speed of light, right?
You don't, and we always have to stay 1 or 2 technological steps ahead of our enemy, and that's what Iron Dome did.
This is a bigger question, Michael Oren, about Iran. Do they have the industrial scientific base to match an arms race? China does, and they might give it to Iran. But what about Iran standing alone? Do they have this kind of... It's a very smart country.
And a very smart country. They have a very robust arms industry and developing of arms, but they can't keep pace with the United States. Iran doesn't have an air force. I mean, this notion that if the United States acts against Iran, Iran's going to make war against the United States is ridiculous. Iran doesn't have tank formations. How are they actually going to make a war against the United States? There was an article by Tom Friedman in the paper this week, which I know you're going to find funny, but had us all laughing here. Because it said that if the United States doesn't reach a renewed JCPOA, Iran could block the Straits of Hormuz and stop oil shipments to Europe, which is already energy starved for the winter. I don't know if you saw this article.
I never read Thomas Friedman. Now I got to go. That's a chuckle. I get a chuckle already.
I tell you why it's chuckable. America has no agency. America, has the 2 largest naval forces in human history just off the coast of Iran. If one of their missile boats tried to block the Strait of Hormuz, blow it out of the water.
I guess Thomas Friedman has never heard of the carriers, huh? All right, well, I'll go read that during the break. You've made my day, Michael Oren. I really don't read Thomas Friedman because I'm interested in reading new things, but I'll go look it up. Thank you, Dr. Michael Oren. Follow him on Twitter, Dr. Michael Oren. Always good to talk to him. Follow me to Hour 2 of the Thursday edition. From Inside the Beltway Live, it's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
There are people today who seem emboldened in wielding naked power, in lying. They don't seem to have the code. They don't believe in virtue. They believe in power, and they seem less troubled. The journalistic class, the medical establishment, they seem to have come unmoored.
We're not alone. We have history to guide us, and it has been a trademark across time and space that the left feels that the means that you talked about are justified by their more noble ends, nobility defined as radical equality of result. And so they feel that what you call lying, the Russian collusion hoax, or Joe Biden that son Hunter's laptop is Russian disinformation, or Anthony Fauci saying I had no role in the gain-of-function research subsidies. All of that is okay because the ultimate end, that is making sure that the, quote, people are equal or that they're fair, it justifies them. And they feel that they have a right that you and I don't have as superior moral beings to use. They don't call it lying, they call it a noble lie. When Anthony Fauci says on one day, don't wear a mask, then wear a mask, then wear two masks, or it's xenophobic to have a travel ban, yes, and then maybe not, he said himself that he lied on about masks so there wouldn't be a quote unquote run on mask. And they've been doing that with everything. If you said, why did James Clapper lie under oath and say this NSA does not spy on people?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Mark Milley admitted yesterday that for that pathetic pseudo-journalist Bob Woodward, for his new blockbuster dishing book of scandal, Mark Milley gave him hours of interviews. Hours? Sorry, how busy should the chairman of the Joint Chiefs be? Just curious. Is the Taliban ready to take back Afghanistan? These are interviews he gave this stinking year. This year. Is the Taliban is rising? Is China is building its military? Is Iran is threatening us? Is Russia is being ever more militaristic? You're sitting down for hours with an avowed, rabid Democrat, quote-unquote, journalist to give inside scoops on how you stood up to President Trump by undermining the chain of command that you, by the Constitution, are not a part of? What the hell are you doing? Maybe those hours could have been spent, I don't know, reading the Long War Journal by our friend Bill Roggio, where he predicted in March that the Taliban would be in control and Kabul would fall. Maybe you would better spend your time reading books like Cynical Theories, reading the works of Chris Rufo about what critical race theory really is and why it's racism and bigotry. But oh no, you had to be a politician.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
When I started teaching, I was only 25. I was only 7 years older than my students. That's not a great span of time for between a man and a young woman, and it is a daily distraction.
That's right. It is. I thank you for your honesty. That is exactly right, and it is not his fault. He's built that way. It's no more his fault than food is a distraction to the hungry. Okay? There is no difference between the two. So I'll tell you an interesting story, really interesting. Many years ago, and I can't find this on the internet, maybe one of you can, and that would be of great help to me. I only remember that he was from a university in Indiana, but I don't remember which university. What did it say, Sean? So a professor did a study and found that one of the two groups, I don't remember the second, of men most likely to divorce were high school teachers. And I think college teachers. In other words, men around a great number of young women divorced at a greater rate than any other men. And I had that professor on with that study. So if you could find that, I could read it to you.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I'm gonna get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Look around. You are witnessing a shameful part of history that is unfolding in the United States of America. We've got a president who was caught in a bald-faced lie about withdrawing from Afghanistan. We've got a general announcing to the world that we have utterly and completely failed. We have a general on record announcing to the world that we are guilty of a major failure.
It was a logistical success, but a strategic failure.
And Joe Biden himself. Here he was with George Stephanopoulos a month ago on ABC.
Your top military advisors warned against withdrawing on this timeline. They wanted you to keep about 2,500 troops.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Indeed, Michael Oren wasn't making it up. I went during the break to find the most recent Thomas Friedman column in the New York Times, and it reads at the end, this energy crisis is coinciding with the stalemate in talks between the U.S. and Iran about restoring the nuclear deal that Donald Trump recklessly tore up in 2018, without any alternative plan to curb Iran's nuclear program. To pressure us, Iran has resumed enriching uranium to levels such that U.S. officials now believe it could only be a few months, or less, away from having enough fissile materials for a single bomb. It could take much longer for Iran to build a warhead and delivery system, but some U.S. officials believe that Iran just wants to turn itself into a threshold nuclear power like Japan, where it would stay just a few turns of the screw away from actually having a bomb. This would give it all the deterrence it needs. Both Israel and America has vowed not to let Iran get that close to the doorstep of a nuclear weapon. Alas, we are approaching crunch time. But what if the U.S. or Israel feels it has to strike Iran's nuclear program in the middle of what could be the worst energy winter since 1973? And what if Iran responds by firing at U.S. or Western oil tankers in the Persian Gulf, where Qatar, the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, resides? Oil and gas prices will go into the stratosphere. So Iran suddenly has new leverage. Hit us and you bankrupt the world. If I can figure that out, the Iranians can. Little darling, it's going to be a long, cold, crazy winter. That is, of course, a bad song lyric from long ago when Tom Friedman was writing original stuff. as Michael Oren just pointed out, I don't read Thomas Friedman. He's a very successful columnist. He perfectly reflects elite left-wing, Beltway Manhattan liberal take. All right, he's a reflection. He used to contribute to it, now he merely reflects it back. They have long been in love with the JCPOA, which accomplished nothing except to be a pacifier for the nervous left about a third-rate power that is a theological fanatic, basically dictatorship, led by the Ayatollah Khamenei, who replaced the Ayatollah Khomeini. And someday, when they get a nuclear weapon, one of those crazy mullahs is going to try and take out Israel. So Israel is never going to let them get a nuclear weapon. And when we do what we have to do, whether or not Israel does it with or without American assistance, the Iranians might be foolish enough to try something like attack tankers, and then the United States will be in the game, and that'll be over. We won't invade Iran. We will flatten their already precarious petrochemical industry, and we will flatten their research society, and we will flatten their economy, and they cannot strike back if we strike early enough. It is that simple. This is not China. This is not Russia. This is a third-rate power with a first-rate vocabulary of invective and slander. We don't have to worry about it, but I didn't quite believe Michael Oren, so I was happy to do that. Do we have our camp song, Adam? Can you play it for me? I got a bunch of postcards from the Wild Adventure yesterday. This is the Wild Adventure. Always reminds me of people who go to camp for the summer, and if you're 55 or older, you'll remember that. That's kids used to have to write camps to mom and dad, camp notes. And up in Montana, where a dozen men a week gather to go fishing on the Madison River, thewildadventure.com, TWA.com, thewildadventure.com, TWA.us, TWA.us, not .com, TWA.us. You can sign up for next summer. They're closing it up this week. They're done because I think winter arrives the first week of October sometimes in Montana, so they go home. Although the hardy fishermen are still out on the Madison. Dear Hugh, long-time listener. See, they send me postcards. See these beautiful postcards from the Wild Adventure? Because I'm stuck in the Beltway. Dear Hugh, long-time listener. Took me a while to sign up, so your persistence is good. This is an excellent part of your Christian mission, Hugh. Rare chance to step back, turn off the phone, and work on yourself. Rare chance to catch the best trout in the world as well. I did not fish out the Madison forever. They will come back. Steve. Thank you, Steve. Hugh, it took 7 years to convince me I needed to go to TWA. This was my second year. Thank you. Rob from San Antonio. It happens that way. Go to TWA.us to figure it out. My experience at TWA was a game changer. I'm 60 years old and was perfect. Necessary for my life. For anyone that has a taste for fishing and a new adventure, do it. Mark Harmer. And by the way, Mark from Maui. So I got people from all over the place. Where's the one I love the most? Here we go. Oh, dear Hugh, just completed the Wild Adventure. I'm not sure how many Jews have attended. Well, this Jew was in dire need of finding his heart. This opportunity was one that forced me to look into my heart and ask some difficult questions. Not all of them were answered, but I met such great people to relate to. Most amazing experience of my life. I just hope my wife lets me come back to serve and give back to others. Mike from Southern California. Hey, TWA.us. If that sounds intriguing to you, and it ought to, TWA.us. And I love the fact that people send me these crazy postcards, and Jan Janur is behind that. Thank you, Jan. You run a great organization up there. TWA.us. I want to go back to the key story of the morning, which is in the Wall Street Journal. A secret CIA gate at Kabul airport became an escape path for Afghans. Now, this is it's a movie, right? The gas station that was actually a tunnel that was surrounded and run by Delta Force, the CIA, and the Afghan commandos known as O2. Getting people out, the main conduit for the State Department in the final 48 hours of the civilian evacuation mission. Do you understand? There didn't have to be a final 48 hours of the Afghan evacuation mission until all Afghans were out. We had a secret way in. We could have gotten out everybody who wanted to get out if we had simply stayed. You said, well, 13 Americans died. That's because we ran that airport recklessly. We ran the evacuation recklessly. We turned over Kabul to the Taliban that were working hand in glove with ISIS, or ISIS members got past Taliban. We can't be sure which. And did a suicide bomber. Then we took out a civilian in response. It was catastrophic for the Marines, the sailor, and the soldier who died, because their superiors did not have time to put together a plan, because they were ordered by an intransigent, stubborn, and out-of-touch Joe Biden to get out by August 31st. I wonder if anyone told him, Mr. President, we have a secret way in. We can close all the gates, keep all the Marines inside, and just take our time to get people in via the secret gate. And given that Delta is there, I'm not too worried about it having overrun by ISIS. But the president insisted we leave. Now, there is one question out there that needs answering. And I've asked a few people, and they don't know. I have heard one estimate that we know that from the time we left, by we, I mean the United States and NATO, rolled up the last airplane on the tarmac and took off, which is August 31st. From the time that airplane took off, I believe more than 200 American citizens have gotten out via chartered air flights from Mazar-e Sharif or Karzai, or over the border in Tajikistan. I know at least a dozen American citizens got out via the assistance of retired special force operators and local Afghan allies over the Tajikistan border with some assistance from Congress. More than 200. Remember, they lied to us. They said, about 100. So we've already got more than 200. The question is, how many more Americans are held hostage in Afghanistan? How many more LPRs? The Biden administration is counting on the American news media, which is coming through, not to report what is happening there. That's their bet. That's their game. And you should not be part of it. The Biden administration has failed those people. They have left Americans behind. And this brings me to Virginia. If you vote for Terry McAuliffe, you're giving Joe Biden a thumbs up. If you vote for Terry McAuliffe, you are voting for Americans being left behind. If you vote for Terry McAuliffe, you are voting for critical race theory. If you vote for Terry McAuliffe, you are voting for a $5 trillion burst of inflationary fueling fake money, printed money. If you vote for Terry McAuliffe, you're voting for a weak defense. If you vote for Terry McAuliffe, you're voting for teachers' unions. If you vote for Terry McAuliffe, you're voting for mandatory vaccines of people who have no connection with the government whatsoever. You're voting in ignorance for higher taxes. You are voting to lose to Tennessee. You are voting to lose to every other state in the union if you vote for Terry McAuliffe. If, by contrast, you vote for Glenn Youngkin, you're voting for a Virginia that will expand, a Virginia that will grow, a Virginia that will cut taxes, a Virginia that will allow parents the voice that they must have if their children are to be educated well. Now, you can go and vote early in Virginia right now for Glenn Youngkin, and I hope you do it today. Go find out where early voting is underway. If you have an absentee, fill it out and return it early. Glenn Youngkin needs to win. A message needs to be sent and received by Beltway Democrats that every Democrat is responsible for the fiasco in Afghanistan and in the Congress. Begin with voting for Glenn Youngkin in the Commonwealth of Virginia for governor. I'll be right back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
When there is a clash on the left between separate preferred activist groups, who gets preference? Who wins? Now, on the left, they have a hierarchy, not any different than a hierarchy that you'd have in any sort of organization. You see, when the left has a moment of disagreement or conflict, it is very important to realize that there is a structure of what matters more than something else. I wrote a piece for humanevents.com where I wrote, it was literally called, "This Matters More Than That." Now, a great example of this is when Fauci, the lockdown artist, the anti-freedom activist, mad scientist, who is the best example of the technological and scientific elite that the left worships. When he was even confronted by a talk show host, where they asked Fauci, they said, so do you think that young people should stop hooking up via Tinder and basically having very promiscuous relationships? And Fauci said, well, you have to understand there's some risk to that. He didn't denounce it because he understood that if he came out against promiscuous behavior for young people, there'd be a revolution.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
These powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
But the first lie that we were told, the first lie that we know now, no one told Biden to keep troops in Afghanistan. That's what Biden said. Did you guys, by the way, hear the chants when Biden went to the congressional baseball game? I don't want to go all over the place here, but that's our commander-in-chief. He didn't get a great reception. But no one told Biden to keep the troops in Afghanistan. That's huge, right? That's absolutely huge. Biden completely lied about it. The guy's a habitual liar. The first lie the senators exposed was Biden telling ABC News George Stephanopoulos back in August that no one advised him to keep 2,500 American troops in Afghanistan. And we know now every single one of them did, from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, regardless of how you feel about them and how I feel about them. Milley, the same is true with U.S. Central Command Commander General Frank McKenzie. So they all admitted that they had agreed with the recommendation to keep at least that many troops, and that they were heard by Biden and basically ignored by Biden. McKenzie admitted, I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, and that he was confident Biden heard all of his recommendations. So the question is, did Biden forget? Did Biden just ignore? You know, sometimes I go back and forth. I'm like, okay, with this guy Biden in the White House, how is he completely off of his rocker? Is he just unable or incapable of remembering anything past a couple hours or so?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thanks so much for listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Generalissima told me during the break I'm trending on Twitter. I really never look at that, and it's because of my Anthony Fauci, should Anthony Fauci step aside column in yesterday's Washington Post, which has got, it triggered the left. And it's got nothing to do with Dr. Fauci. I don't really think there's an argument. Of course he should retire. The face of public health in America has to not be a polarizing figure. It has to be a trustworthy Marcus Welby. It has to be a trustworthy... Who's the doctor that took care of Mark Green at the end of ER? She was played by the English woman. It'll come to me. The elevator always comes up. But it's got to be someone who gets America to be persuadable. Dr. Fauci's lost that ability. The polarizing figure. Like the guy, he's done a lot for America, great America and all that stuff. Got all the awards he should get, but at 80 years old, time to move along, Doc. Alliance Defending Freedom is a sponsor of this show, and they are leading the fight against the attempt to follow and harass parents who are attempting to input to their local school districts how they want their school districts to deal with critical race theory and with masking. ADF is leading the fight against this, and Kristen Wagoner is one of those involved in that, and she is absolutely committed to getting it done. She is one of the great litigators. There are 74 others on staff at ADF. You heard from John Birch yesterday. I just want you to assure you the bench is deep. Matt, my pal, is over. I mean, I just know everybody at ADF, and they are superb lawyers. David Cortman, Josh Lawrence, people that I've known for a very long time, Jeff Benchall. These are people I've known for decades. They are great stewards of your money, great stewards of liberty, great protectors of religious liberty especially. Please go over to HughHewitt.com and make your contribution today. You can do so by the banner at the top, or you can call 866-359-9644. Market check for those of you going out the door wondering whether or not you're going to lose your life savings today. Do not be worried. Let your heart be still. I don't know what the markets are going to do today. Neither do you. But I do know that overseas, they're having celebrations in England, Germany, and France that the Democrats and the Republicans have agreed to punt the debt limit till December. And so they're all up 1.5%, for example, in France. So I can't imagine today will be a bad day. The 10-year Treasury, though, is at 1.52%. Now, I did read an article yesterday that shows the 30-year fixed rate for the average home buyer in America has gone up steadily over the last month. But it went up from 2.5% on a 30-year loan to 2.75% for the average American. Well, that's too bad you didn't get 2.5%. But if you get 3 or lower, you're living in a land that most of us in the world have never been to and can't save enough money on a refi to get to. But if you're young enough and you're looking at 28 years left on your loan, 25 years left on your loan, you're refinanced now. And either you add years to your loan and lower the payment, or you take years off your loan and keep the payment the same. Either way, a lower interest rate means you ought to refinance, and you do it with andrewandtodd.com. This is the second lesson of life that I give to young people. The first lesson is always to maximize your 401 Roth contribution and to match whatever your employer will match. Otherwise, you're giving away money. 401 Roth money grows tax-free. So if you are not maximizing every 401 Roth opportunity in your life, you're down there with the Flintstones. Rule number 2, if your employer is matching retirement contributions and you're not doing it because you say, well, I can't afford it, I need my budget, then you're really up there with the morons who believe in the JCPOA. Because that means you don't realize you can take the money out whenever you want. So if you add the money in whenever you want, you can take the money out whenever you want. So please do those two things. And check on your interest rate with andrewandtodd.com. 888-888-1172. When we come back, I talk with Senator Joni Ernst on the Senate Armed Services Committee about it's astonishing to me that the CIA had a secret entrance to to Karzai Airport, guarded by Delta Force and the best in the Afghan army, and we didn't keep it open and we left. It's just astonishing to me. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Joe Biden doesn't even try to get a 51% consensus. He said yesterday, I came in and there were 4 million, that's all. He knows there were 17 million people vaccinated. He just lied because he knew that the media wouldn't say it. And then people like you and I, Eric, and our listeners today probably think, well, how can he's non compos mentis. He doesn't even finish sentences. He won't answer questions. He doesn't try to build a consensus. He just says, pay your fair share in the tax. We're not getting enough taxes when he welched out on $500,000 of taxes, we're told. And yet the left would say, we don't care. If maybe this is liberated. You say that he's non-compos mentis. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do
See,
about
that's
it?
the question.
That's their attitude.
Do you think we'll be able to do anything about it? That's the first question.
I think if we get the vocabulary and we understand without being shrill, and we just say, listen, these are not Democrats, they're not progressives. These are hardcore socialist Marxists. And I know there's a lot of naive that follow them that may not be, but when you rename the country from 1776, basically its founding brand, to 1619, or you tear down statues, or you cancel people out, you're Jacobins and Bolsheviks. And you've got to say that to them. And then when you have racism to fight racism, or discrimination to fight discrimination, then you're a racist. Let's be honest about it. And we don't use that terminology. We don't say these are Jacobin Bolsheviks, and they're racist, and they want to destroy a country.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands,
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
that's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Thousands of people watching this hearing today that are looking at you all and saying, I can't believe they're sitting there and not answering the questions and are trying to punt. I yield back.
Punt. The polite word for it. God bless Marsha Blackburn. You are the three people who may have broken the American military. That was yesterday during the Senate hearing with the CENTCOM commander, with the Secretary of Defense, and with the most senior military officer in the United States, Mark Milley.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Women are born ignorant of male sexual nature. It's not their fault. We're so different from women. There's no fault here. But it is the fault of a society that doesn't teach them that. And society always did. But not since the 60s. Because they wanted to believe men and women are basically the same. So I'm curious, are you a religious home?
Yes, we are religious.
Right. So here's my theory. Religious Americans are less naive than secular Americans.
I like that theory. I concur because we speak of evil.
That's right.
And we speak of wrongdoing. Yes.
Exactly right. You're a joy. You're in Fort Worth. I don't blame you. I hope we meet one day. And your husband should give me a couple of cigars. And they're the people teaching your kids.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Over the 21 years of this radio show, it's been my honor to meet many Gold Star family members. Mark Daly, who grew up in Irvine, his mom and dad became friends of mine. He was lost in Iraq and Mosul, I think in 2006. J.P. Blecksmith, who grew up in Pasadena. I know his dad, Ed Blecksmith, was lost in Iraq in Fallujah, in the Second Battle of Fallujah. And I keep his badge on my desk in the studio in California. I'm joined now by Jane Horton, who is a Gold Star spouse, as was Michelle Black yesterday, who's written the new book, Sacrifice. Jane Horton is working around the clock with Joni Ernst, Senator Ernst from Iowa, to get a memorial on the Mall for those who have given the ultimate sacrifice in the long war, the war against global terrorism. And I welcome you both. Jane Horton, welcome. You're also our liaison with the Afghan ambassador. So you know Ambassador Roz as well, but we'll cover that in a moment. Will you first bring us up to speed on where the memorial is that needs to get built on the Mall quickly?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on today. It's an honor to be on with one of my personal heroes, Senator Joni Ernst. So we're very grateful for her leading the way to honor those who have fought, bled, and died in the global war on terrorism.
She is terrific. Yeah.
So we have been fighting pretty hard as Gold Star families to ensure that our loved ones are being honored in the proper way that they should, with a memorial on the National Mall. There's currently legislation in the United States Senate, Senate Bill 535, that we are pushing very hard to get as many co-sponsors as we can to allow us to build this memorial on the National Mall. So back in 2003, Congress had passed a law that said nothing else is allowed on the National Mall. They did that because they didn't want people to continue to keep asking to put little things here and there on the National Mall, but they knew that there could be exceptions for big things like the Global War on Terrorism Memorial or a major war memorial, and Congress has made exceptions before. They made an exception for the African American Smithsonian. So we are hoping that we can also get an exception after our longest war of an all-volunteer force over the past 20 years. And so we are fighting very, very hard to get as many people on board as we can, as many senators, as many co-sponsors, so we can give, again, those who have fought, bled, and died for us the honor they deserve. So we've hit some roadblocks, but we're continuing to push very hard. We're starting to gain a lot of momentum. Senator Ernst has been very strategically bringing this bill as well to the Senate floor. She's done it twice now for unanimous consent vote. So we are hoping that it'll either pass that way, it'll pass in the National Defense Authorization Act this year, or it'll just pass as a standalone bill. So as many people as we can get behind us, we are grateful for.
Jane Horton, let me turn to your hero, Joni Ernst. She's a good friend of the program, and we respect her greatly. Senator Ernst, I want Mark Daly's name, J.P. Blecksmith's name, and every other warrior, including Brian Black, who died in the global war on terrorism in Africa, memorialized in the wall. And this is going to go on for a while. If you need unanimous consent, who in the world objected to this?
Well, and thank you, Hugh, and it is great to be on with Jane Horton. She is a dear friend, a true patriot, and we'll continue fighting this battle to get this memorial built. But I have taken this bill to the floor twice now, and it has been blocked by Senator Joe Manchin. He is the chair of the committee that this bill needs to pass through. So we continue to encourage Senator Manchin and his staff to bring the bill up in committee. Just allow the senators to vote on it in committee. And if that won't happen, we will continue to do the live unanimous consents down on the floor. And I know that's a bit wonky for folks out there, but basically we're trying to get this bill passed any way that we can. It is so important that we get this memorial done. It's 100% privately funded. Its rightful place is on the National Mall. So it is a bipartisan bill. I want folks to know that, too. Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire is my co-sponsor on this. And we just really want to memorialize and recognize all those that have fought and those that have died, just like Jane's husband Christopher did in the global war on terror. It is extremely important, I think, especially now when we have an era of veteran that needs healing. They need a place to commemorate their service and sacrifice. The time to do it is right now.
Senator Ernst, can I ask which committee it is and what senator? I'm kind of stunned by that, but we do cover, this show covers West Virginia, including those who commute into the Beltway, but also Wheeling and the rest of the state. Can you tell me what committee it is that the bill is bottled up in, and why Senator Manchin is adamant, or the staff of the committee is adamant against its getting a vote?
And it is the Natural Resources Committee. They oversee the Park Service. And, of course, this does go through a subcommittee. We have had a hearing through the subcommittee that is chaired by Angus King. He did a wonderful job, allowed myself and other veterans to come in. It is a bipartisan bill in the House as well. We were able to speak in favor of the memorial. Of course, it was just a hearing. It wasn't a bill markup, and that's what we need Joe Manchin to do in his committee, is actually bring the bill up to be voted on in committee. And again, I can't stress enough, this is bipartisan. There are so many people in the Senate that recognize the global war on terrorism, although President Biden has turned the page and wishes us to forget Afghanistan. We are not going to do that. And there are veterans that can't do that. They need healing. We all need a place to commemorate these warriors, those that supported our warriors. And we've had 6 former secretaries of defense. They wrote an op-ed piece not long ago in the Washington Post, and they all said, regardless of whether they worked for a Republican president or a Democrat president, they said this is rightfully deserving of a place of prominence on our national mall. You know, as Jane pointed out, it was an all-volunteer force that fought in our nation's longest war, and they deserve to be honored.
Jane Horton, I note in the background I did on you that you are the Congressional Military Liaison for the Embassy of Afghanistan, so I assume your husband was lost in Afghanistan. Would you tell me what your reaction was to the collapse of the Afghan evacuation effort? There's a new story on a secret gate run by the CIA. We could have stayed there a lot longer and saved a lot more people, but Joe Biden wanted to close the door, and I wonder if that desire to close the door is also blocking this bill, which I'll bet 95% plus of Americans of both parties or no party at all support.
Yes, sir. I've done extensive work in Afghanistan. It's definitely where I've invested my entire heart since I lost my husband back on September 9th, 2011. The beautiful Afghan people and the culture gave me pieces of my heart that I never thought I'd get back. And so it's been incredibly painful for me to watch what's happened in Afghanistan. It's been incredibly painful to watch throughout the past 10 years since I lost my husband, just the apathy in many ways of the American people towards the wars that our all-volunteer force has been fighting. I know people do care deeply about our troops, and they care deeply about Gold Star families. But I wish that, we've seen it shouldn't have to take an evacuation like this for the 99% of Americans to pay attention to the 1% that have been serving for the past 20 years in Afghanistan. So my wish on the whole thing is that next time, if America has to go to war, that our country goes with us, and that they continue to engage in the political process and just stay informed on where our troops are going, because as we know as Americans, our troops don't have any choices in the policies for the wars that they are fighting.
Senator Joni, let me ask Senator Ernst a question here, Jane Horton, which is, what is the most effective thing for people to do? My friend John Androzik has been out playing Blood on My Hands, and Afghan veterans show up at all of those shows. I was at one at the Birchmere in Alexandria when he played not long ago, and Afghan veterans were there. They follow him. They want a memorial. They want to be helpful to the Afghan people in exile. What is the most effective thing for listeners of the show to do, both about the memorial and generally about the Afghan exodus?
Yes, John. I tell you what, Hugh, John has been doing a phenomenal job as Five for Fighting out there promoting, of course, reconciliation, but also pointing out the failures of an administration as we withdrew from Afghanistan. I have listened to Blood on My Hands many, many times, and folks, I encourage people to listen to it, and it is a song for our veterans, hopefully to bring them a little bit of solace in that people recognize what has gone on in this failure to draw down peacefully the war in Afghanistan. It didn't happen the way it should have. But the best way for folks to engage for the memorial is to reach out to their members of Congress and encourage support. It is important. The more of their constituents they hear from, the more those senators are likely to react. Encourage them to speak with Senator Hassan and I about the importance of this bill. Folks like Jane are doing God's work through grassroots work. They are reaching out to the Gold Star families, the different veterans organizations, to members in their community, and we're seeing it work. Folks like John Ondrazik are, of course, out there promoting it. Jane's friend Milo Ventimiglia is out there promoting it. It is so important that we gain as much traction through that grassroots as possible. I'm just honored to have been able to meet so many of our Gold Star families, to share with them in their memories of their loved ones. Jane has become such a dear friend, and her promotion work. She is such a powerful advocate. So again, folks, spread the word, share John Ondrazik's song out there, Blood on My Hands. I think it brings attention to the healing that our nation needs in such difficult times. So the global war on terror, it may be over for this administration, but I haven't heard the terrorists acknowledge that the war is over against America for them. We know that we will continue fighting terrorism on into our future. What we need to do now is recognize those that fought in the global war on terror.
The memorial needs to be built. It needs to leave space on it for those who will lay down their lives willingly in the all-volunteer force. And I want to say thank you to Jane Horton, an honor to talk with you, and to Senator Joni Ernst. At a minimum, everyone driving in from West Virginia and in Wheeling, give Senator Joe Manchin a call and tell him to put the bill on a markup, get this memorial built. And everyone out there, please follow Senator Ernst's advice and go and listen to Blood on My Hands. Thank you, Jane Horton. Thank you, Senator Ernst. Let me remind everyone that this show is sponsored by our friends at ReliefFactor.com. I'm going to the mall today. In fact, with the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, going to do walking on the mall today and stop by the National Gallery, and ReliefFactor.com will be powering that as we zip around the mall. It's an overcast, sort of dreary day, and if it rains, it's always good to have the National Gallery or the Science Museum, or Air and Space doesn't do it for me, but I like natural history. Whatever it is, or the National Portrait Gallery, the African American History, or the American Indian Museum. I love going to the mall, but there needs to be a global War on Terrorism memorial there, and Relief Factor should be taking me there today. It should take you everywhere on the mall. It should take you wherever you want to go. Go and get Relief Factor at ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 gets you started with a 3-week starter pack. $19.95 gets you on the way to feeling great. Come right back after the break. Senator Jim Talent, former senator from Missouri, joins me next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build a superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Burka.
Thousands of people watching this hearing today that are looking at you all and saying, I can't believe they're sitting there and not answering the questions and are trying to punt. I yield back.
Punt. The polite word for it. God bless Marsha Blackburn. You are the three people who may have broken the American military. That was yesterday during the Senate hearing with the CENTCOM commander, with the Secretary of Defense, and with the most senior military officer in the United States, Mark Milley.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Women are born ignorant of male sexual nature. It's not their fault. We're so different from women. There's no fault here. But it is the fault of a society that doesn't teach them that. And society always did. But not since the 60s. Because they wanted to believe men and women are basically the same. So I'm curious, are you a religious home?
Yes, we are religious.
Right. So here's my theory. Religious Americans are less naive than secular Americans.
I like that theory. I concur because we speak of evil.
That's right.
And we speak of wrongdoing. Yes.
Exactly right. You're a joy. You're in Fort Worth. I don't blame you. I hope we meet one day.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined by former United States Senator Jim Talent, one of my favorite guests. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Fine, and I love you too.
Okay. Let me begin with the story in the Wall Street Journal by Michael Bender. How tight is Trump's grip on the GOP? Take a look at the Ohio Senate primary. It is undeniable that former President Trump has many millions of supporters in the United States, and that many of those supporters will follow his recommendations. He also has around him a circle of acolytes who sometimes purport to speak for him, like Boris Epstein and others, who aren't actually speaking for him. Boris is mad at me because I've just given my objective opinion that Eric Greitens from your home state of Missouri will lose that Senate seat if he is the nominee because of the bondage and assault charges, the impeachment, the campaign scandals, all the stuff that goes with Eric Greitens. And Boris Epstein is mad at me. One, how important is a Trump endorsement? Two, what about this satellite group of people who have some association with President Trump who purport to speak for him?
Well, I think Trump's endorsement is important in the same sense that I think endorsements typically are important. They raise the profile of the person endorsed, and they're sort of they're a powerful piece of evidence in support of that person, assuming you like the endorser, right? But I also think voters then step back and look at candidates and make their own judgment. I would say that about everybody. I say when people ask me to endorse them, that anybody who thinks that just because people like Jim Talent, they're going to walk into the ballot box and vote for whoever Jim Talent says, I don't think that's right. I think it's a favorable piece of evidence, okay? And in terms of the people around you, President Trump's always had an interesting group around him. People come and go. I think people want to know what Donald Trump thinks, not what somebody around him thinks.
I don't think it can hurt you to be endorsed by anyone unless that person is crazy. and a racist, and you don't want them, and you have to affirmatively go out and disavow an endorsement. But acolytes of the president, former president, don't get any traction, I don't think. All right, now
I think that underestimates voters, and it's classic for consultants to underestimate voters. I think people who love Donald Trump are going to take everything he says with respect, and it's going to be a powerful, piece of evidence on behalf of whoever he endorses. But I think they're going to make their own judgment.
All right, we've talked about this story often, Jim Talent, but I want to raise it with you. Record numbers of Chinese Air Force fighter jets and bombers conducted drills near Taiwan in recent days. This is from this morning's Washington Post, including 30 HA-16 fighter jets and a dozen H-6 bombers. What ought we to think about that? What ought we to do about that?
Yeah, I read there was 54 of them. Well, here's what we need to do urgently and in the short term. We need to get more longer-range precision ordnance into Indo-PACOM. So this would be longer-range cruise and ballistic anti-ship missiles. We need to build this missile frigate and get as many of them as we can into Indo-PACOM. We need to harden our ISR and improve it. In other words, we need to do things to strengthen military deterrence in the short term.
Senator Talent, ISR stands for?
Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Okay, so in other words, we need the Chinese to think, the Americans have a lot of assets in the region that can strike at our assets were we to attempt some forcible action, including an invasion against Taiwan, and we might not be able to get all of them before the Americans get us. That's what we need to do in the short term. Longer term, we have to pursue all these technologies that will restore the strength of our deterrence, including, for example, hypersonics, which I know you've talked to Robert O'Brien about a lot.
Yeah, but I am wondering what needs to be done to make the CCP, and in particular General Secretary Xi, believe that we would actually defend Taiwan were he to move against it.
Well, I would say the same thing, you. See, one of the things I've been saying for some time now is words are not going to make anywhere near as much difference as actions. If they see us preparing to defend Taiwan, they'll believe we will defend Taiwan. So we need to act. I mean, words, and Blinken's been doing some good things. I like AUKUS. That's another thing we need to do is to show the Chinese that there is a firm coalition of regional powers against them. And I think AUKUS is the best thing I've seen come out of the Biden administration so far. So I give them credit for that. So those two things, actions, emphasizing our deterrent will and strength.
Then John Kerry went to Paris and apologized on French TV, saying Joe Biden didn't know anything about AUKUS.
Yeah, I can imagine what the top of Ron Klain's head probably came off when he watched that.
That's the president's chief of staff. I mean, it's unbelievable. This isn't an administration. It's a group of free actors out there like, no valence to Joe Biden's White House.
Right. I don't know how they can put up with that. But, I would imagine that Kerry kind of thinks himself on a par with the president. I mean, he served with him a long time. Kerry probably thinks he should have been president, not Joe Biden. And so he just said what he thought. I wouldn't doubt it's true, though. Would you?
No, I'm not sure the president's up to speed on anything. But I am glad they did AUKUS. That's why I like Jake Sullivan. I want to thank you, Jim Talent, for being here. Senator Talent can be followed on Twitter from the Bipartisan Policy Center at Jim Talent on Twitter. That's easy enough, at Jim Talent. Come right back, America, but visit Alliance Defending Freedom's banner over at HughHewitt.com during the break. Please contribute and come back for hour 3 of today's Hugh Hewitt Show.
most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as is any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
I also have a view that the withdrawal of those forces would lead inevitably to the collapse of the Afghan military forces and eventually the Afghan government.
Well, you were right, and it took 11 days for the Taliban to take over Afghanistan. Have you seen some of the images coming out of Afghanistan, by the way? They're real pleasant. Bodies being hung from overpasses, people being executed in the street, an Afghan soldier led out into the street and just shot dead. The Taliban walking around with these giant whips and they're hitting women over the backs. Here's Secretary Austin also contradicting Biden and exposing Joe Biden for the bald-faced lie, the bald-faced lie he told the American people.
It's a simple question, Secretary Austin. He said no senior military leader advised him to leave a small troop presence behind. Is that true or not? Did these officer and General Miller's recommendations get to the president personally?
Their input was received by the president and considered by the president for sure. In terms of what they specifically recommended, Senator, as they just said, they're not going to provide what they recommended in confidence.
What a crap storm. What a crap show. Senator Josh Hawley put it best. Thank goodness for people like Josh Hawley and Marsha Blackburn and Dan Sullivan. The Republicans were certainly on fire yesterday in holding these failed commanders to have some sort of at least a public accountability.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
So who wins when there is a clash on the left between separate preferred activist groups? Who gets preference? Who wins?
Now, on the left, they have a hierarchy. Not any different than a hierarchy that you would have in any sort of organization. You see, when the left has a moment of disagreement or conflict, it is very important to realize that there is a structure of what matters more than something else.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Streaming on Salem Now. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I grew up poor, which is
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt trending, as usual, on Twitter. I hope one lefty, Kimberly Johnson, who I've never heard of, but she has got 77,000 followers. She is apparently the host of the Start Me Up podcast and the Sexy Liberal Podcast Network. So I find that amusing. She writes, "It's time for the Washington Post to stop allowing traitors like Hugh Hewitt to spread propaganda and misinformation packaged as conservative opinion." She is reacting to my column in the Washington Post, which went up on the landing page yesterday after the show. Is it time for Dr. Fauci to step aside? This has touched nerves on the far left. I don't know why, but I have a theory. My theory is pretty simple. Dr. Fauci is not a public health official in their eyes. He is a brave hero against Donald Trump. Now, that was not Dr. Fauci throughout the first year of COVID. Dr. Fauci was part of the COVID response team. I know this very well because I know a lot of people on the COVID response team very, very well, including Ambassador O'Brien and Alex Azar and Peter Navarro and many, many people very well on that team. And Dr. Fauci was a respected and productive member of the team. Dr. Fauci opposed the travel ban from China. Dr. Fauci wanted to tell the noble lie that masks were not helpful because Dr. Fauci was afraid that masks would vanish from the ERs and hospitals where they were necessary. That's actually the opposite of what Americans did. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt, for example, took every mask we have in the house as a matter of routine preparedness in California and drove them to the local hospital, where they were in 95 masks, because that's what Americans do. And so Dr. Fauci has consistently underestimated what Americans do and gets it wrong. And while he does not run the CDC or FDA, I pointed out he's become the face of pandemic response in the United States. And before, as even maybe, I'm not sure, we can gather by Christmas, which he walked back on Monday. Before that, I had interviewed him last week on this show for, I think, the half-dozenth time. And his unwillingness to even consider that at some point he becomes counterproductive tells me, okay, he's not really living in the zone of reality where public health officials have to live. The most recent screw-up is the allowing by the advisory panels of the CDC and FDA to insert equity considerations at all, into the question of efficacy of boosters. Scientific advisory panels should answer, is the proposed booster efficacious in preventing the virus from reaching hospitalization or death? That's it. Upside and downside from certain science. Instead, some members of those committees brought up and were not overruled the idea that the United States is using too much vaccine. That's not what they're there for. That's virtue signaling. That's politics, and it ought to have been shut down. I asked Dr. Collins directly and Dr. Fauci directly, what about that? Neither of them would condemn the panels. Both said they disagree with that use of the equity argument, but that the panel was not illegitimate. The panel's illegitimate. If you pollute a panel's scientific deliberation with political calculation, you have ruined the result and turned it into intimidation. I like that because it sounded like something Tarzana Joe would say or Al Sharpton. And therefore, I wrote a column, "It is time for Dr. Fauci to step aside." Based on that interview, Dr. Collins, the walk back, everything. Dr. Collins announced he's getting out. He's 80 years old, for goodness sake. It's got nothing to do with Trump, but it has sparked outrage, and I am always amused. The Washington Post is always happy because it generates clicks, right, from angry lefties. And then when the lefties get anger, the Trumpists come out and they go read what got the lefties angry, and it just was wonderful for an op-ed. I love that. But my column in the Post is written by me, for my point of view, and read by millions because I represent most of the 75 million who voted for Donald Trump. And increasingly inside the Beltway and on major news outlets, there is nobody representing President Trump's voters. I voted for him. I had my arguments. I am a sometimes Trumper. What he did for the Supreme Court is his lasting and most enduring achievement, parallel with his achievement of waking America to the menace posed by the Chinese Communist Party, parallel with his Operation Warp Speed initiative that burst through FDA and CDC obstacles to rapid evolution of the virus, very close to his buildup of the military, which was not successful in building the Navy, but did replenish stores and stocks. Donald Trump did a lot of great things, like the right to try legislation, like the First Step Act, which some of my conservative friends oppose and some of my Trumpist friends support. So Donald Trump is like every president, a mixture of great things and not so great things. His post-election presidency was ignoble. His rally on the Mall was misguided. He is not responsible for the 800 lunatics who invaded the Congress, nor those intent on violence. They ought to go to jail, and they're going to go to jail. But, as Mike Pence said a couple of days ago, the attempt to delegitimize the 75 million people by ghosting them from media. And that's what's happening. They're being ghosted. They're being ghosted from network television. They're being ghosted from op-ed pages. They're being ghosted. And in their place, there are never Trumpers. It's remarkable. But this triggering is part of that. This over-response to a rather ordinary op-ed that says what half of America and not a few Democrats agree: time for Dr. Fauci to exit stage left or stage right or just stage front. Get off the stage has come. And that has triggered. Generalissimo alerted this to me. Generalissimo lives for trending. You can follow him at Radio Blogger, by the way. Can we get Radio Blogger to trend? Would you all make up stuff about Radio Blogger and get him to trend? Because he got trend jealousy.
Make up stuff about Radio Blogger. That
would be a first.
Yeah,
I'm
like
always
that's
very
new on this show. Make stuff up.
Now, since you're there today, which is remarkable, I wanted to ask.
Speaking of making stuff up, yes.
Yeah, I want to ask about Mrs. Radio Blogger and Gavin Newsom's edict that all shall be vaccinated.
Yeah.
She is a teacher.
Uh-huh.
So I would like to know, because you never tell me anything that's going on in California. You didn't even tell me there was an oil spill in Orange County.
Well, I was actually there. I actually watched. I was in Huntington Beach.
Are you responsible? We've got him. Sue him, but not me. He was there. He just announced it. Thank you. I want to get rid of him. Turn off his camera, Ben. I want nothing to do with him.
Yes, because I own a cargo ship.
He's responsible for this. See, he admitted it again. Radio Blogger, what did you do? You never pushed the right button.
I watched the air show.
What, did you hit the wrong button again?
Next to my friend William Shatner.
What?
I was sitting next to William Shatner watching the Thunderbirds.
You two caused the oil spill?
Well, hey,
You and Shatner?
Shatner, I can't explain everything that Shatner does.
Look, I'm denying that. I believe that's a libel. Generalissimo is, again, your target for litigation. Make Radio Blogger trend. Having admitted to culpability with William Shatner for the oil spill in Huntington Beach, I believe that is trend-worthy.
If that's not enough to trend, I don't know.
I don't know. That's an admission against interest. You'd better go away before you bankrupt this show. Because there are some people literally have no sense of humor in America. Ever. None. You are among them, by the way.
Sense of humor is gone right now.
Sense of humor is gone. Carl is the leading indicator of lack of sense of humor. Carl, the retired house painter who travels 10,000 miles to paint people's houses. Don't you think that's odd, by the way? I'm a little off topic, but I've got Governor Larry Hogan coming up pretty soon. I'll check.
A little off topic, yes.
Well, I just don't you think it's odd that you retire from painting and you move to Texas to retire and then you drive to California and to Colorado to paint your friends' houses?
I'm just trying to guess where the conversation is going to go next.
Well, I would like him to drive to Maine because I got the estimate on painting a house in Maine, and I cannot believe it.
Why can't you? Well, I can.
My brother-in-law lives in Maine, and I saw the estimate to paint a house in Maine.
Who wants to go up to Maine to paint a house?
I think Carl might be willing to do it. You think?
No, I actually don't think.
I think he's in. All right, let me talk about Alliance Defending Freedom.
Maybe in February.
I'm trying to plug a sponsor, and it's the sponsor I love the most. Now, I love all my sponsors. I love the Salvation Army. I love Food for the Poor. I love Prison Fellowship. I love them all. I love Relief Factor and Birch Gold. I love AndrewandTodd.com. I love them all. But I am committed to Alliance Defending Freedom because they protect them all. They protect my ability to speak freely on the radio and joke if I want. In fact, if any lunatic sued me, I'm sure ADF would step up. If any lunatic sues you because you are saying a prayer at your city council, they'll defend you like they defend the town of Greece in New York, and they will win. If you're a preschool that's being discriminated against because you're a Lutheran preschool, they will defend you and they will win. But Alliance Defending Freedom wins 13 out of 14 at the Supreme Court in the last decade. They win because of you. Because you go to HughHewitt.com, you wait for the Alliance Defending Freedom banner to appear at the top, and you give them $100 or $500 or $1,000 if you can afford it, or more if you can afford more. You support Alliance Defending Freedom for the same reason I answer the call when anybody asks me to step up on behalf of the free exercise of religion, because that is the backbone of the United States Bill of Rights. It's the first freedom. Go and support Alliance Defending Freedom at HughHewitt.com and come right back. The Hugh Hewitt Show continues.
Now.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened.
It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as...
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Pandering, overweight snowflake. What has race got to do with the last election and angry voters? Nothing. But you want to virtue signal to your political masters. If it's possible, let's ignore for a second that you have admitted you called the Chinese equivalent of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that you haven't denied that you gave him a heads up totally illegally because you have no role in the chain of command, and say, don't worry. If that crazy guy, the president, if President Trump is going to declare war with China, I'll give you a heads up. I'm on your side, you commies. I'm a commie too. Is that why in 2015 in combat at a NATO summit, you can see the video right there. He says, China, not our enemy. Really? Because China thinks America is her enemy? Why would you say that? And why do you think it's your duty to be communist China's man inside the Pentagon? Let's put that all to one side. Your love of bigoted propaganda like critical race theory created by Derek Hall, Biden's mentor at Harvard, which states The textbooks state if you are white, you are racist. You may not know it, but you're racist, which itself is a statement of bigotry.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
Women are born ignorant of male sexual nature. It's not their fault. We're so different from women. There's no fault here. But it is the fault of a society that doesn't teach them that. And society always did. But not since the 60s. Because they wanted to believe men and women are basically the same. So I'm curious, are you a religious home?
Yes, we are religious.
Right. So here's my theory. Religious Americans are less naive than secular Americans.
I like that theory.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, for those considering careers in politics and policy.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, reminding all of you from Virginia to get out there and vote. Vote, vote. Glenn Youngkin needs to be the next governor of Virginia, or this state is going to face a massive deficit, a huge tax increase, and school boards that are completely indifferent to parents. Because Terry McAuliffe said he believed in parents sitting down and shutting up. That's a paraphrase, but that's what it is. If you've got a kid in school, any school in Virginia, you got to vote for Glenn Youngkin. Get out there, vote early. If you got an absentee, return it early. Vote. Vote in Virginia. I've already voted. So did the fetching Mrs. Hewitt for Glenn Youngkin. Please get out there and vote. Let me check markets. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Great lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. You can call them up at 888-888-1172. They and their team will get right back to you if they're awfully busy right now. But they will be right back to you. I think it's better to go to their website, AndrewandTodd.com, answer a couple of questions. Do you need to originate a loan? Do you want to buy a second house? Do you want to buy an investment property? Do you want to refinance at one of these ridiculous low rates? Are you a veteran who doesn't want to put anything down? Are you a senior who wants a reverse mortgage? If you just give them a little clue, they get it to the right person, they get right back to you. But they sponsor the market update. But right now, the 10-year Treasury is going up. It's up to 1.524% this morning. That's up from 1.2% about a month ago. That means the 30-year rate has ticked up a little bit. Not anything appreciable that will show up in any kind of monthly way, but over the course of 30 years, it'll cost you a couple of $1,000s to sleep on it. But when inflation hits you, it will cost you tens of thousands of dollars if you sleep on it now. So go to AndrewandTodd.com and stop making excuses. I don't want to do the paperwork. I don't want to talk to a stranger. They're not strangers. I know them both. I've known Andrew for 20 years in a Bible study with him. You can trust him. You could let him babysit the kids. Well, maybe you'd have Mrs. Andrew Del Rey babysit the kids. But you'd go to church with him, and you'd trust your car with him, and you'd trust your paperwork with him, and you'd trust your passwords with him. Todd Avakian, you would allow to babysit the kids. AndrewandTodd.com. The Dow yesterday up 102, the S&P up 17, the NASDAQ up 68. Why did they all go up? They all went up for the simple reason that we're going to have a budget deal. We're going to have a budget deal. Now, not a debt limit deal, excuse me. Now, I'm going to talk with Larry Hogan after the break. Before I do, Generalissimo just told me something interesting, which is really rare. Really, really rare.
Uh-huh.
And so I want to bring him in because he has a scooter, which he calls not a scooter. He calls it an electric bike. Who makes the electric bike?
Perdigo.
And so what did Pedigo do that got you and William Shatner together?
They hold a Pedigo Palooza once a year, and this was in Huntington Beach. This was at the Pacific Air Show.
Would you explain to people what a Pedigo is?
It is an electric bike. It is a normal bicycle. It has gears. It has pedals. You ride it like a normal bicycle. It just happens to have a little battery on it that you can recharge. And what that battery allows you to do is if you go...
Not pedal.
Well, if you really want to do that, you can. It's basically a pedal assist. It lets you climb hills that might otherwise be a little steeper than you might like to do. It gets you back home if you have extended yourself.
On the rare occasions when you stop by Casa Hewitt to say hello, you've been on your Pedigo.
Yeah.
And you're not sweating. You're fresh as a daisy. It's like you just got out of the Irish Spring commercial.
Well, that's actually not entirely true.
No, I mean you're wearing a pretty funny-looking helmet, which I applaud, by the way.
The helmet is actually a cool deal. The helmet is
that a Pedigo helmet?
No, that is a Cena helmet. It is a Bluetooth helmet so that you can actually...
Oh, that's right. You talked to the fetching Mrs. Radio Blogger.
Yes.
Did people know this? That
when you're on a street, when you're on a street, front to back, nose to tail on a street, you're out of line of sight because
you're the Jetsons. People don't know this, but we actually have Jetson technology available.
Mock all you want. It's
I'm not mocking. I want to know the name of that.
You're not mocking.
The Pedigo is wildly popular. I hope they sponsor the show. People should be on Pedigo because
now, if they do sponsor the show, which I would highly encourage, it might be best if you don't refer to them as a scooter, you dummy.
But what about the Jetson hat? What's that called?
It's a Cena helmet. S-E-N-A.
Spell that for me.
S-E-N-A.
S-E-N-A. Cena.
Yes.
If we got one of those between there and here, would you finally talk to me?
Am I not talking to you right now?
Only because the camera's on you. I'll be right back, America. Governor Larry Hogan and I have a serious conversation ahead. Pedigo and Cena. I love it. I love it.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Instantaneous, momentary pleasure is a value the left understands that keeps their entire coalition together. And Fauci understood this. Fauci understood the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. He understood the narrative that you do not cross that line. Now, we see this happen all the time, but we don't always talk about it. We don't always, those of us that are conservatives and actually love the country, we don't actually analyze the place that certain activist groups and ideas have over the other. Who gets the final say when there's a clash, when there's a conflict, when there's a collision? Another example would be, so the other side cares deeply about the Me Too movement unless it threatens Joe Biden becoming president. So Me Too matters a lot unless it gets in the way of controlling the White House. Power, the control of the federal government, then matters more than some sort of virtuous, righteous campaign to listen and to believe all women. Currently, there is an epic clash that the media is totally ignoring. Now, they are covering it here and there, but there is a clash between two of the favorite teams that have been created, fostered, supported, and aided over the last 18 months. You have on one side Team BLM. BLM Incorporated, racial justice, skin color matters. Now, as all of you know, after last summer of Floydapalooza, that group gets whatever they want.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
But the first lie that we were told, the first lie that we know now, no one told Biden to keep troops in Afghanistan. That's what Biden said. Did you guys, by the way, hear the chants when Biden went to the congressional baseball game? I don't want to go all over the place here, but that's our commander-in-chief. He didn't get a great reception. But no one told Biden to keep the troops in Afghanistan. That's huge, right? That's absolutely huge. Biden completely lied about it. The guy's a habitual liar. The first lie the senators exposed was Biden telling ABC News George Stephanopoulos back in August that no one advised him to keep 2,500 American troops in Afghanistan. And we know now every single one of them did, from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, regardless of how you feel about them and how I feel about them. Milley, the same is true with U.S. Central Command Commander General Frank McKenzie. So they all admitted that they had agreed with the recommendation to keep at least that many troops, and that they were heard by Biden and basically ignored by Biden. McKenzie admitted, I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, and that he was confident Biden heard all of his recommendations. So the question is, did Biden forget? Did Biden just ignore? You know, sometimes I go back and forth. I'm like, okay, with this guy Biden in the White House, how is he completely off of his rocker? Is he just unable or incapable of remembering anything past a couple hours or so?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
There are people today who seem emboldened in wielding naked power, in lying. They don't seem to have the code. They don't believe in virtue. They believe in power, and they seem less troubled. The journalistic class, the medical establishment, they seem to have come unmoored.
We're not alone. We have history to guide us, and it has been a trademark across time and space that the left feels that the means that you talked about are justified by their more noble ends, nobility defined as radical equality of result. And so they feel that what you call lying, the Russian collusion hoax, or Joe Biden, that son Hunter's laptop is Russian disinformation, or Anthony Fauci saying I had no role in the gain-of-function research subsidies. All of that is okay, because the ultimate end, that is making sure that the, quote, people are equal, or that they're fair, it justifies them, and they feel it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, joined by the governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan. Maryland is going into the shoe this weekend, Governor. I'm afraid it's going to be tough for your Terps when they run into the Buckeyes.
Well, we're going to give it our best shot, but you're right. It's a pretty tough game.
It's a tough game. Speaking of games, I know the governor's got this palatial suite over there at Raven Stadium, and on November 28th, the Browns are in town. There are 3 Hewitt men in the area who are. The tickets haven't arrived yet, Governor.
Well, you've got it. I consider it done. I'd love to have you guys with us.
You know, there's nothing like shaking down a governor on air. It's really wonderful. But
now, we'll have a couple hot dogs ready for you.
Look, what I really want to talk to you about is your Fox opinion piece, but I have to. News happens. In fact, Roy McGrath is on the front page of the Washingtonian this morning, your former chief of staff, and they conveniently, while he has been charged with fraud for his time at the Environmental Services Agency, it says, it buries, though the actions in question aren't related to McGrath's time in the governor's office, the stench of the allegations is sure to waft into a potential bid by Hogan for president. Now, I think that's about the unfairest thing in the world, but would you, for the record, explain, you didn't know anything about what Roy McGrath, I assume you knew nothing about Roy McGrath's alleged perfidy at the Environmental Services Agency?
Well, of course not. More than a year ago, when these allegations first arose about some things that happened in his previous employment, within days he was gone from the office, and it's been a year-long state and federal investigation, which came up with 27 counts of fraud and other things. But number one, it didn't have anything to do with his job with us. He only worked here for 2 months. But it also was something that we had nothing to do with and no knowledge of.
Well, that is what I assume, but everyone at the Washingtonian decides to blow it up. It will dog whether you run for president or the Senate, so it's better to talk early and often about that. My next question... Oh, go ahead, Governor.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know that I'll be running for anything, but I can't imagine some employee's former activities in his former job would have any bearing on me.
No. Now, you haven't ruled out either of those races, have you?
I've been saying for a long time that I don't have a lot of interest in the Senate. It's just not the kind of job for me. I'm more of an executive. I'm running a $50 billion a year budget with 60,000 employees. I'm making decisions every day, and I've spent my whole life as a business executive, and being one of 100 people yelling and arguing in Washington and getting nothing done doesn't have a great appeal to me.
Well, I look at Joe Manchin. I think Angus King, Joe Manchin, and a center-right Republican would be pretty powerful, along with Susan Collin. I also
a lot of people are making that argument to me. I'll tell you that.
Well, are you listening?
Well, I don't throw them out of the office, I guess.
Okay, that's good to know. That's a maybe. Because, Chris Van Hollen, who is running for re-election, I swear, if I rode with Chris Van Hollen from both ends of the red line, which begin and end in Maryland, no one would know who he is. He's like the invisible man in Maryland. You could beat him, Larry Hogan.
Well, you probably know who he is if you were riding with him. So.
Well, if I was with him, more people would come up to me, and I'm not well known.
There's no
and
question
they would
about that.
Yeah, so
maybe you ought to run instead.
No, I'm a Virginian. I'm helping Glenn Youngkin join you at the RGA, and I assume you're helping Glenn Youngkin do that as well.
I'm trying to do that as well. Mike Pence and I did an event together for him a couple of weeks ago, and he's a great candidate, and we're looking forward to. I'm on the executive committee of the RGA, and we're looking forward to welcoming him as a new member.
People need to get out and vote in Virginia. I already have. Now, Governor, next story. How tight is Trump's grip on the GOP? Take a look at the Ohio Senate primary. It's in the Wall Street Journal today. Does Donald Trump have anything to do with whether or not you will run for the Senate or the president?
No, that wouldn't have any impact on me at all. But there's no question that Donald Trump has a pretty tight grip on a large portion of the Republican primary base. It's rapidly shrinking from where it was. It dropped from 85 or 90% down to I think the most recent Politico poll had him at 59, which is still substantial. But I think the peak of his power was in November, and it's precipitously declined since then.
Governor Hogan, a lot of people tell me that he will be nominated if he runs again. I don't believe that is necessarily so. He certainly will be formidable. I will interview him and every other person who runs for office, and I hope to moderate debates. But do you believe it is a foregone conclusion that if the former president seeks the nomination, he will get the nomination?
I think if 6 months is an eternity in politics, and we've still got nearly 3.5 years. So I just think it's far too early for anyone to speculate about what might happen. I mean, just look at past history of every presidential race, and I think every single time someone was on the cover of a magazine saying they were going to be the next president, they never were. So I just think we ought to just take a look at what things look like after next year's races in 2022, and the race is in 2024.
Governor, if you were both a former governor and a currently sitting senator, you'd be very formidable. So I want to go back to that Senate race for a moment. I really think you ought to do that for the good of the country.
Well, I think you and Mitch McConnell and Rick Scott and a bunch of others would probably agree with that. And look, as I said, we've got a long time to figure that out. Right now, I really am. This is not. It sounds trite, but I'm really focused on my day job, and I've got an important job here running the state of Maryland, and I don't like it when people focus on their next job rather than doing the one they were elected to do.
Well, provided you do your job and get those tickets to the Browns game, I'm all for you. But let me actually turn to the reason.
If that's all it takes,
I'm a cheap date. No, that's not true. Governor Larry Hogan, President Biden abandons the word at home and abroad. This is your Fox News op-ed that caught my attention. In the Wall Street Journal also this morning comes news that there was a secret gate at Karzai Airport, through which the CIA, Delta Force, and elite Afghan commandos led American citizens, LPRs, and at-risk Afghans for a week prior to our bug out. If we'd stayed another month, we would have saved thousands more, Governor Hogan. What do you make of what the president did?
Well, there's no question about that. It's an unmitigated disaster. The president apparently didn't listen to any of the advice from his military advisors. And look, I don't consider myself to be a military expert, but it's pretty simple that you have to get the folks out of there first before you pull out all the guys with the guns. And we did it almost completely backwards by removing all the troops and then having this, not understanding that, the situation was going to collapse. And it could have been, look, you can argue that we needed to get out of Afghanistan after 20 years, but you should have had a real plan to, gradually make sure that we get all of our Americans and our allies out before you take out all of the military presence. And we should have never given up the air base ahead of time. We shouldn't have, everything that you could possibly do wrong, they did wrong. And he just was completely, misguided, or, his decision-making was terrible.
Now, 2 nights ago, the Nixon seminar gathered. It's chaired by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, and 15 very sharp national security specialists who are across the political spectrum, including 2 former Deputy National Security Advisors. All of them said the problem wasn't the Doha Agreement. The problem was that the Doha Agreement was conditional. The Taliban broke the conditions, and Biden didn't do anything. What did you make of the original Doha process, Governor Hogan?
Well, I think having a discussion and a process about how we get out of there, I was okay with, but certainly there was not a thorough plan about how to do that effectively. I can't speak to exactly what happened, but, Joe Biden's, just complete failure, his assessment of that a Taliban takeover, he said it was highly unlikely. It happened almost immediately. He claimed that al-Qaeda was gone from Afghanistan. He kept, he just didn't have a basic command of the facts, and he was being evasive and contradictory. And I'm not sure who didn't do what or who dropped the ball at a national security and military level. But it's certainly, I don't think if you plan to screw it up, you could do it any worse.
My friend John Androzik, Five for Fighting, went up to an Annapolis music venue, and my buddy Larry O'Connor is on opposite me. I crush him every morning, but we still like Larry. Performed the song Blood on My Hands. And Blood on My Hands has become a rallying cry for Afghan vets because they feel like their efforts have been thrown away. 20 years of American and Afghan blood thrown away. Do you share that sense of, my God, what did they do with them, Governor Hogan?
I think most people feel that way. I have a daughter and a son-in-law who both served in Afghanistan. And I can tell you, they both feel the same way. It's, how can you spend 20 years and all the countless lives and the blood that was shed and accomplish nothing? I mean, we're almost in worse position than we were when we started the whole thing.
Governor Hogan, whether you are a senator in 2023 or a president in 2025 or simply a private citizen with influence, we have to do something about China, which ran 48 fighters and bombers into Taiwan airspace this week. What do you think we ought to do?
Well, there's no question that China is the biggest threat that we face on just about any front. Economically, militarily, the cyber threat that's very real, and we're getting beat at every turn. They're outsmarting us. They're making they have long-term planning and strategic efforts that are ahead of schedule, while we kind of sit and twiddle our thumbs and pretty much ignore what's going on. So, China is starting to, again, this is just the latest iteration of it with the flights over Taiwan, but they've been taking all kinds of actions, even with vaccine diplomacy, where they're sending all kinds of vaccines to countries that we haven't helped and putting themselves in a position where those countries are indebted to them. And they're flexing their muscles in Australia, where they own the ports and they're the biggest part of their economy, and now they're trying to direct what they do. China is a very real present and future threat.
So, Governor Hogan, last question. When you see the profligate spending in D.C. that the Democrats are proposing, what will that do to the Maryland economy? A lot of people think blue states, and you run a blue state. You managed to govern a blue state as a red governor.
Yeah.
What will that do to your ability to actually stimulate economic growth if the feds flood another $5 trillion into the economy and fuel inflation that way?
Well, I think inflation is the real scare. Look, we have one of the best economic recoveries in America, the fourth fastest job growth. Since I've been governor, we went from 49th out of 50 states in economic performance to number 6. So I think we had the best economic turnaround in America. But we're threatened by actions in Washington, and it's completely frustrating to me that we're talking about jamming through this $3.5 trillion, boondoggle of a bill. I wrote another op-ed talking about this, where we reached, and I was very involved in bringing everybody together as chairman of No Labels and the Problem Solvers Caucus. We got Joe Manchin, we got the President Biden to agree to take all that stuff out and focus on infrastructure. And then he went back on his word, abandoned the deal, and tried to tank his own, what he was touting as a bipartisan accomplishment, to try to waste $3.5 trillion that there's no support for and no agreement on, not a single bipartisan vote. So it's just a battle. Look, if we can't even come to pass a bill that everyone agrees on in a bipartisan way, I don't know what we're going to do about them jamming through. They have the votes, unfortunately. We lost the White House, the Senate, the House, and now they're in control. So we can do what we can to stop it, but it's a pretty scary thought.
I'm going to close by where I began almost, Governor Larry Hogan. Chris Van Hollen is an impediment. He is simply a yes vote for Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden. He absolutely has no presence on the Hill, no presence on committee, no ability to get anything done. You can beat him. The good of the country is run for both, run for Senate and President, but run. When are you going to make that decision by?
Well, the Washington Post did a poll that said I would beat him by 12 points, but again, that's not where my focus is, and we could talk about it at the Browns game. How about that?
Oh, all right, provided that I get safe passage in and out of Raven Stadium, because we'll be wearing orange and brown, Governor, because we are the original. The Ravens are not a friendly match like the Steelers.
Here we go. That's a good way to end the interview. Come on.
All right, my friend. Thank you, Governor Larry Hogan. Good pieces in the Fox News and everywhere. I always appreciate talking to you. Governor Larry Hogan, thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
When I started teaching, I was only 25. I was only 7 years older than my students. That's not a great span of time for between a man and a young woman, and it is a daily distraction.
That's right. It is. I thank you for your honesty. That is exactly right. And it is not his fault. He's built that way. It's no more his fault than food is a distraction to the hungry. Okay? There is no difference between the two. So I'll tell you an interesting story, really interesting. Many years ago, and I can't find this on the internet, maybe one of you can, and that would be of great help to me. I only remember that he was from a university in Indiana, but I don't remember which university. What did it say, Sean? So a professor did a study and found that one of the two groups, I don't remember the second, of men most likely to divorce were high school teachers. And I think college teachers. In other words, men around a great number of young women divorced at a greater rate than any other men. And I had that professor on with that study. So if you could find that, I could read it to you.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I'm gonna get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway live on a Thursday morning where the Senate Republicans and Democrats have agreed to punt. And you might expect me to close with breaking news, but I'm breaking news about Dante. 100daysofdante.com. That's the number 100 Days of Dante. D-A-N-T-E for the benefit of the Steelers fans. What is it? Well, I'm joined by Anthony Nussmeier and Matt Anderson to explain that, both of the Baylor community, I believe. Matt, welcome. Is Anthony also a Baylor Bear?
Sadly, he is not. We are not also honored to be Baylor Bears, but it's a sign of the scope of this project that our good friends at the University of Dallas, we've got the Catholics and the Baptists who've joined up together. And it's worse than that. We also have Gonzaga University, who we beat in the national championship. That's a part of this project. Templeton Honors College at Eastern University, our friends out at Biola. We got a lot of schools involved with this, so no. Oh, and Whitworth. I can't forget Whitworth as well, up in Eastern Washington. So it's a great
Anthony,
project.
I am so glad that we have a Dallas guy here. As a fellow member of the Tiber Gang, tell me how you came to get involved in 100 Days of Dante. We've had Matt on before. I love this project. I want everyone to know about it and participate in it.
Yeah, we love it too. Thanks so much, Hugh, for having us on this morning to talk about who is the man who is undoubtedly the world's greatest poet. I'm obviously a little bit biased, being my background is as an Italianist and a medievalist. So I study Dante for a living. As I tell my students, I'm a dentista, not a dentista. So if you have problems with your teeth, don't come and see me. But if you have problems with reading Dante, that's when you want to come see me. And so I became involved in the project through our former president, Tom Hibbs, who just left the University of Dallas this past spring. He had come from Baylor originally, and so was familiar with the work that Matt and others are doing at the Baylor Honors College. And when they approached Tom with this project, he asked me to be the point man at the University of Dallas. And so my job is, as I've been telling people, is sort of executive producer Dallas version of 100 Days of Dante. So my job has been to wrangle our fellow faculty members to do various Conti and video lessons for the project 100 Days of Dante, and also to promote the project to a broader audience in which I think we've been quite successful.
I'm going to come back and talk to you about teaching Dante in a second, but Matt Anderson, for the benefit of those who did not hear the first conversation I had with you, explain the project, its genesis, and how people get involved.
Yeah, so I was teaching Dante to undergraduates last fall, and I had a great time of it, and students really resonated with it. You know, it's an old poem, and it's very strange and foreign to them, but they connected with it in a way that did not surprise me, having taught a little Dante before. And I thought that I would write my way through it. I've got a little newsletter, and I thought, there's good stuff here that could help people live their lives better. And I would spend 100 days writing my way through it. There's 100 canti or 100 sections of this poem. And then I thought, 100 Days of Dante, how is that not a thing? How come no one has done this? And I was scrolling Twitter as one does, and I saw a tweet from Pope Francis where he actually encouraged high schoolers to read through the Divine Comedy this year in 2021 because it's the 700th anniversary of Dante's death. It was on September 14th. And so I thought, look, if there's going to be a thing, 100 Days of Dante, this is the year to do it, 2021. So on September 8th, we launched the project. We've got videos from faculty at the universities I've mentioned and a few others. That we've got 100 of these videos that are coming. A new one comes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They're 7 to 9 minutes. You can get them by podcast. They're very digestible. And the aim is to walk through each of the sections of these poems at a manageable pace, and to provide a little instruction about what Dante is doing within this section, with the aim of highlighting its spiritual and moral significance. The commitment of the project is that this is a text that can change people's lives if you read it appropriately. We have teachers who have been teaching this in classrooms, in many cases for decades, much longer than I, who are much more qualified than I. And so they are fantastic at highlighting the literary aspects of the text and the moral and the religious significance of the text. So that's the project. It's Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Let me ask Professor Nussmeier, as a longtime teacher of Dante, if a homeschooling family or any English classroom in the United States began this project, would their year be profitable? Because they get about 100 classes a year in, say, an 11th grade, a 10th grade, a 9th grade. Would that be, in your view, a good substitute for whatever else they were going to teach?
I think so, absolutely. I have young children, and I started reading abridged versions of Dante's comedy to my boys when they were 3 years old, for example. Oh. And I certainly know of teenagers, 8th graders, young high schoolers who have been reading the entire Divine Comedy. Not only profitable, but this is a work that is concerned with the saving of souls. Often when I teach Dante, I reflect on an article published back in the 70s in Commentary magazine by former Cornell University political scientist Werner Dannhauser, who talks about liberal education being concerned with the architecture of a student's soul. And he says in this article that we must treat three big concerns, or three questions, and those questions are God, love, and death. Dante's Commedia has these in spades, right? In Inferno we have death, in Purgatory we have love, and of course God in the final canticle of Paradise, as Beatrice and Dante make their way up through the spheres of the heavens to ultimately lay their eyes on the ultimate object, which is God himself. And so I don't think there can be anything more profitable, at least as far as reading a literary work, than to read Dante. And his beauty is to take the particular and to make it universal, as all great authors do. And so I would recommend this to any homeschoolers, any high schoolers, those who attend classical education charter schools, but really anybody.
You know, Professor, you remind me, I'm older than you are, and in my parochial education, there were 4 great things you were to reflect on every day: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. You've got it down to 3. But I didn't get any Dante through 12 years of Catholic education. Why did he fall out of favor?
Well, I'm not certain that Dante has ever really fallen out of favor. The incredible part about the success of Dante's comedy is that it has nearly always mattered. Often those literary works we deem great or classic were not well received right away. I'm thinking recently about an article I read in the New Criterion about Moby Dick, for example, which was a commercial and critical flop initially. The greatness of Dante's poem, on the other hand, was recognized immediately. And save for, let's say, a few relatively fallow periods, it's remained thus for 700 years. There was a fallow period in the Renaissance where Dante was criticized for being too capacious. And in the 19th century, Dante was interpreted differently by the Romantics. But what has happened in the 20th century and 21st century is not necessarily that the whole poem has fallen out of favor. It's that we've focused too much on Inferno and not enough on the second and third canticles of the poem. We focused too much on the titillating aspects of the first canticle of Hell, and we've not focused on the sort of corrections that occur later on in the poem. And this is true of parochial education as it is the broader education. And so part of the aim